what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians to talk about their lives, music, and craft beer. I hope that you guys have been having a great week. I most certainly have been. I have something coming up tomorrow, which is super cool, something I'm excited about, something that I've been working on for the past few weeks with a very good friend of mine from the Thirsty Thursday virtual hang gang. Keep your eye on the Vox and Hops social media accounts because there's something new starting tomorrow and it's cool. This week's underrated gem is Casket Robbery. Get ready, people. This is a hell of a track and I'm super stoked to play it for you right now. This is From Hell by Casket Robbery on this week's underrated gem.
All those dead girls and that horrible creature.
Shall I telephone for the ambulance? No, the undertaker.
Smothering disease. Storming rising. Blood will fill the streets. Streets are painted with the emblem. Strikes the good scream in the dawn. Shadow in the night. Winter is here. Rebound and grows.
Boom. Holy shit, that was amazing. I love that track. I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. If you guys enjoyed Casket Robbery, if you did, go and check out Casket Robbery. I have put all of their pertinent links in the description of this podcast. Go support them because they are such a sick-ass band. On today's episode, I am with an awesome human who runs the Metal Matters podcast, Everything Went Black podcast, and Necromaniacs podcast. He's also the vocalist and guitarist of the band Tombs. Get ready, people. This is Vox and Hops episode number 209 with Mike Hill.
I'm
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Today I'm with Mike Hill, the vocalist and guitarist of the band Tombs. I'm super stoked to be with you. You have a new record coming out via Season of Mist called Under Sullen Skies. How you doing, Mike? Let's start with a simple yet complex question that I like to throw people right at the beginning recently. How have you been coping with 2020?
Well, you know, it's been a challenge, like for everyone else. And yeah, at the beginning, it was very tough. You know, everything was shut down. A lot of our, we had a lot of touring that got canceled. Actually, one of my bucket list tours that I've been sort of dreaming about for most of my life got canceled. It was us with supporting Napalm Death, which,
oh shit,
I mean, one of my all-time favorite bands, man. And once we got offered to do that tour, I was like, this is great. It's like got this new record coming out. You know, it was back when the EP came out. I'm like, perfect, be able to hit the road, do a U.S. tour. The other bands on the bill were great too. And lo and behold, the whole thing got shut down. And yeah, it just felt like everything was on this like very intense stasis, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I mean, things have gotten better. We recorded this album. I'm grateful that I'm able to continue to work and make a living. I know a lot of people are experiencing hardships like that, and that's not the case with me, which I'm very grateful for. And yeah, just trying to make the best of it,
Absolutely. And that tour package was an absolute rager with Aborted on it as well.
Aborted, yeah, totally. And yeah, it's a drag. Hopefully it happens next year. Maybe, I don't know.
I would hope so. There's a lot of talk of rescheduling, moving things forward and stuff. VOX&HOPS is all about hanging out with my metal friends, talking about their lives, music, and craft beer. What are you sipping on there, Mike?
Well, this is it's a weeknight, so it's a school night for me. I have to work tomorrow, and right now I'm drinking Celestial Sea. What the hell is it called? It's basically just spearmint tea in water.
Beautiful. That sounds very refreshing. On my side, I'm going to be drinking Ras L'Bock's Georgette. This is their sour and wild mixed fermentation brew. It's been aged for 22 months in oak.
Wow.
Huge shout out to PA Mayu for hooking me up with this. Always a pleasure to drink some Ras L'Bock. This clocks in at a nice 6.2%. Talk to me about beer. Do you remember the first beer you ever had, Mike?
Probably something cheap and, readily available, like Busch or Budweiser or something like that, Probably listening to, some old school heavy metal like Scorpions or Iron Maiden or something and along those lines. Probably outside, by a lake with some older guys, and some chicks. That's probably my experience, I think, with my first beer,
That sounds like a fun time and like an awesome movie that I want to watch. Cheers, Mike.
Cheers.
Ooh, it smells awesome. So you can smell the oak. This is awesome. To die for. Those
nice.
Wild, earthy notes. Amazing. Have you dabbled into the world of the obsessive, compulsive, slippery staircase of craft beer yet, Mike?
I'm kind of a dilettante when it comes to beer. I've never been much of a drinker, really. I think, but I do like. There's Cape May, which is like a local Jersey brewery. They have some nice IPAs out here in the East Coast. I like Allagash White. I'm not really one of those that's something I've experienced like maybe 2 years ago, and I've been a fan of that. That's very good. Yeah. So I mean, those are probably my two go-tos right now. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's actually a pretty good question because it actually has molded some of my music preferences in adult life. My parents were really into like girl group stuff from the 50s, Chuck Berry, Roy Orbison, that sort of like stuff, like, rockabilly, very, very East Coast, like New York girls groups like the Shirelles and the Flamingos, things like that. And I think that, like, especially Roy Orbison, sort of primed me for my like fascination with the Misfits and Sam Hain and Danzig and all that kind of stuff. I mean, a lot of the punk that I listened to was delving into that kind of world. I love the Misfits. They're like one of my favorite bands. Sam Hain, one of my favorite bands. Bands like X from LA, had that kind of like American, like rock and roll, like vibe to it. So that was the kind of stuff that I absorbed as a kid, which was just being presented to me like through my parents. Like they had like 78 RPM record collection and things like that, Pretty much, they used to have these boxes. I mean, you probably seen those, like these like record boxes with like a handle on it. And, I would just go in there and look at all that stuff and check things out. And, there was one of those old like console stereo systems, this big wooden piece of furniture. And it had the 78 RPM option on it. So I play 78s and 33s and 45s and all this stuff and just going through the collection. My dad was very big into music and stuff. And, he grew up, we're originally New Yorkers. So my dad was and my mom both grew up in the Bronx. So my dad was very much always going to the Apollo and very much exposed to all these things, and that background made it into my life too, fascination with music.
First show that you ever went to go see was with your father?
The first show? Yeah. Oh, actually it was. The first show I ever saw was with my dad. I went to go see Molly Hatchet at the Poughkeepsie Mid-Hudson Civic Center. Yeah,
what was that whole experience like? Do you remember, the vibe of it? And is it something that appealed to you immediately that you would one day be the person on stage?
Yeah, I think that at that point I was like very young. I think I was like 12 or 13 maybe. And I'd started playing guitar, and I started thinking about having some kind of aspiration to play in front of people. And I was very much into bands like, Scorpions, UFO, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. And I ended up buying these Molly Hatchet records because they had these Frank Frazetta album covers. Yeah, by the way, I was really into Conan and, H.P. Lovecraft and all that sort of stuff. Like I think anyone that listens to metal loves Conan. So
You have to.
It's like a rite of passage. So Molly Hatchet had really brutal album covers, but they weren't necessarily like Judas Priest or something like that. They had this kind of Southern rock thing going on, which was like, I was experiencing things, open, to different ideas. So that was like literally the only show that was happening. And I was like, Dad, I got to see live music, man. You got to take me somewhere. So, we saw that there were tickets available for the show, and me and my dad went, and there was like a lot of like marijuana being smoked and all that. So my dad was like, kind of like, that was not his experience. And I was a kid, I was 12. So there's always like older people like hanging out. It was like, dudes with like long hair and like mustaches and everything, and chicks with like feathered earrings. And, it's like that, Hudson Valley vibe, you know what I mean? Like upstate, not quite upstate New York, but like the Hudson Valley, that's sort of like rural, suburban kind of thing. And the Mid-Hudson Civic Center was like this kind of B market, as as I learned, later on in life, what an A to B market was. Poughkeepsie is like a B market, so shows like that would roll through, not necessarily like your Metallicas or yours. Well, actually Slayer did play it up in Poughkeepsie at one point, but yeah, it wasn't that kind of A market. So, but that was the first like heavy rock show I ever went to. It was with my dad.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I discovered music and metal through my father as well, so I love that. Take me to your first time on stage.
My first time on stage. It had to be like, all right, I played in bands in high school, but we didn't really play on stages. It was more just like VFW type stuff. And the first actual stage that I played on was probably in the early 90s when I was in this band called Otis. And it was like, it was the early 90s. So we were like kind of like this amphetamine reptile. There's a little bit of a hardcore influence. There was a lot of like a helmet kind of thing going on. And it was at the Rathskeller in Boston, which is like, kind of like a famous or infamous venue in New England. And, it's in some ways it's the CBGBs of Boston. Like, all these, the Police played there back in the day. Metallica actually played a show, and they were first starting out. So it was like, kind of like a big deal for me to play a show there. And it was like some Tuesday night thing where, our band had a demo. So we were trying to like, play shows. We didn't really know anyone. So we got put on a bill with a bunch of bands that really were like, I'm sure like, everyone jokes about the ska band being on the bill, but I think there literally was a ska band on the bill. So, it was like, step one towards, progress towards like actually getting to play in front of people, and doing it, not being in the practice space. And I remember, that was like the first band I ever really did anything with, like touring and making records and that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, well, we practiced a whole lot, man. We were like obsessively practicing like every day. And I was like, wow, I'm like on stage now. This is like, now we're not in the practice space anymore. This is like for real, it's kind of, it was like a very, actually, it's funny how much I remember that because that's quite a while ago. But yeah, it was a formative experience, I think, for me.
Exactly. And that's why I always ask about it, because that first time on stage, and it's funny that you mentioned that you played a bunch of shows before that, but actually just getting onto the stage made such a big difference.
Well, it really did, because like when you're playing in just like a party, or something like that, which is like pretty much what I did all through, high school. It's like we played at parties and, there was like the occasional like VFW kind of thing, and which was just a party really. I mean, I lived out, the town I grew up in was like small, and none of us had, cars or anything like that. Playing in like New York City was like not an option. Mm-hmm. We had no transportation or anything like that, so I played parties and I guess the occasional random show, and but it was like, yeah, we literally just play on the floor, and there's no stage, no real sound system. Like we brought our PA basically, and that was like kind of the sound system that we used.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I feel on par the first time that I played Fufone Electric here in Montreal. That was like a huge moment, knowing that it's the CBGBs of Montreal. Nirvana has played there. It was like a huge, I'm here, but there was nobody there to watch me, but I was there.
Well, that's the thing, man. It's like, it becomes like the location is like, you're like, oh yeah, we're playing here. This is like where like Sting was or whatever, like U2 played here. But when you get there, there's like, oh yeah, there's like, my girlfriend's here. Like one other person. I don't know that guy standing back there. I never seen him before, but he like leaves before you play or whatever. That's the way it goes. And it's like, I think most people that play in bands, like they play more of those shows than they do shows that are like, okay, this is like real happening. And there's like, all these people here and it's like cool. Like, it's like you play more shows that there's no one there, I think, so at least in my experience.
It happens. It definitely happens. And every show is worth at least 3 jams. So just keep doing them, people. Keep pushing. You always learn something new on stage. It's always very important. Let's dance into Under Sullen Skies, the new record. How do you feel? You mentioned that you guys dropped the EP, or you were touring the EP. Everything got canceled because COVID sucks. And then you had the chance to record a new record. Was that something that was already on the docket, or is it something that you guys advanced because you couldn't tour?
Well, it was already in the plan. When we signed to Season of Mist last year, we were going to I'm not going to say self-release, but we were going to license that EP. We were going to record it and license it. But then we actually signed a deal with Season of Mist, and they were like, right away, they wanted to do an LP. So they were like, well, how soon do you have enough material for a full length? And I was like, pretty much. So we had those, like, I don't even remember how many songs are on Monarchy, I think 5 or whatever. So that was recorded, and then we already had the time booked. It was actually going to be done between the drums are going to be done before the Napalm Death tour, and then the guitars and vocals and everything else and all the rest of the production is be done right when we get back from the Napalm Death tour. So we still follow that schedule. You know what I mean? It was like the drums were done, and then like a month later we did the guitars and everything else because the tour got canceled, but the studio was closed because like obviously everything was in lockdown, and the engineer Bobby Torres, he's a friend of ours too, not just a guy we record with, but he's a good friend. He was like, hey, if you guys feel comfortable, we probably shouldn't be doing this, but if you're down, let's try to be as safe as we can and do the record. And I'm like, sure. So we went up there. It's just like one or two of us at a time, and and Bobby, and we just made our way through the record, did everything. And Season of Mist wanted to stay on schedule at releasing it in the fall, which is like it's coming out in a little bit over a month from now. And yeah, I mean it's all part of the plan, and I'm just happy that they were able to follow through with that because once things started dragging on and on, I was like, man, what the hell what's the significance of all this? Is there going to be like, is this record going to get bumped until next year because there's no tours, we can't support it? And that's probably the biggest drag. It's like, I mean, I love making records and recording, but like playing live is really what it's all about, for me and the rest of the guys in my band too. We all agree that like the live, and just the adventure of going on tours, like seeing something different, traveling and, flying to Europe and doing stuff over there. But all that stuff is so far away right now. It just seems so distant. And, I had, like I was saying, we had these huge plans for this year, just being on tour, and just I'm home, and it's like, I haven't spent this amount of time at home I can't even remember the last time I was home this much, it's kind of a bummer,
It's a blessing in disguise with certain things. I have young children, so I got to be there throughout a whole summer for the first time. But you touched on a bunch of topics that I did want to go through. Releasing a record during a pandemic. Was there ever a moment that you thought they're going to shelf it, they're going to push it? Or was there a discussion with Season about that to wait until you could actually tour it? Or was it just always, let's just keep going with the schedule and release the music?
The doubt, like, actually, I didn't think they were going to shelve it because they would have, shut it down like right in the beginning of the production. They would have been like, all right, let's reschedule everything. So, I mean, I was under the impression that it was coming out on schedule. But, there was like a couple week period, like once the tour got canceled, I was like, I wonder how long this is going to go on and like what the repercussions would be. Cause as you know, it's like, at this level of music and this style of music and playing extreme metal or heavy metal music, the touring is like really what it's all about. It's like, you stay,
we got some shirts.
Yeah. You got to stay in front of people. And, it's like, I mean, that's like one of the greatest things about extreme music and metal is like, people actually buy merchandise. It's like I know people that play in like indie rock style bands and different types of bands, and like no one buys anything at the shows. And I was like,
really?
I mean, I actually a couple of years ago I went to see the Bryant Jonestown Massacre, and my girlfriend at the time was like a huge fan of theirs, and I mean I like Bryant Jonestown Massacre too. I'm a lot of respect for Anton, and so I'm at the show. And I'm like, I thought like, could buy like a hoodie or like a long sleeve or something, what I mean? I'm like, I figured they'd just be merch. They didn't have anything. They had like one t-shirt design. Really? It was just like, and I was like, wow, no one was there. No one was buying anything. It was like, it's a pretty well attended show, pretty big venue. There's probably like 600 people there, which to me is a big show. And I look over at the merch table and there's like one person standing there, just kind of like absently looking at some of the stuff. And there was one shirt design, and I'm like, damn, how do these guys like survive on the road, man? And it's like, but that's what I mean. It's like it's a good scene, metal and hardcore punk. It's like, you know, it's different than other scenes, and I feel, you know, I'm happy to be part of that, you know.
Absolutely, and it's a sense of community for sure. And I miss going out on tour, and I know I'm going to go through this city. I know that that person's going to be there, and I miss hanging out with my global metal family. I really, really do.
Yeah, totally. You know, and even being home and not going to shows too. It's like,
Absolutely.
you know, yeah, that's like the main thing. Is like, you know, all right, I'm home, but I'm not even going out. I'm not even doing anything. It's like there aren't even any shows, and you know, that's like the worst part about it too.
But you have had a lot of time to keep going in the world of podcasting.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's the one thing that hasn't slowed down.
It's gotten faster and more intense. So let's talk about podcasting. You have 2 of them running. Am I correct?
Well, 2.5, I would say. There's
tell me all about your podcasting work, because I think it's awesome.
yeah, well, there's Metal Matters, which is the Gimme Metal, like that's their platform, and that podcast is weekly, and it's a mix of straight up interviews and then like classic records type episodes. And lately, I've been doing these like deep cuts episodes with a variety of different people, where we just, you know, we'll talk about a specific band or records that aren't necessarily well known, or playlists of various stuff that's like a little bit more obscure. And like a lot, I mean, we touched on that earlier this year, and people seem to like it, so that's why I pursued it, because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, you know, Gimme's going to want to have like, you know, talk about like Rain and Blood by Slayer or something, you know, where it's like a well-known, but people who listen to it they want to learn stuff. They want to like find out about things that they're not necessarily aware of. Because I guess that makes sense. It's like the whole point of that platform is to like have curated content where people can learn about things. And, you know, you can listen to Dan Lilker's DJ show, and he can play like obscure black metal and thrash and stuff like that. And I guess I just been following suit with the podcast. You know, spend an hour talking about different bands and records that we know about and are, to me, like some household bands. But people are like, oh, I never even heard of those guys, and thanks for turning me on to it. Like Skinyard, for example, was a band that, to me, they're a household name. I mean, I listen to them all the time, but like, you know, it's a lot of people have never heard of them before. And there's this one particular record called Hallowed Ground that, you know, I get to this day, that episode ran, I think, last year. And to this day, I get like emails every now and then about, oh yeah, man, I just listened to the Hallowed Ground episode, and that band is really cool. I didn't realize that those guys went on to be in Grunt Truck, and Jack and Dino was in the band and all this other stuff. So that's been a lot of fun, you know. And the other weekly I do is Necromaniacs, which is a podcast about you know, horror. And I do it with 2 other guys. I do it with Mike Scandato, who is the vocalist for a New York hardcore band called The Last Stand. And he was formerly of a band, which I'm not going to say these guys broke up, because every now and then they'll play shows, but a band called Inhuman. And Mike and I started the podcast together, and we just recently drafted Jeff Kashid, who played bass in ISIS and Palms. And, you know, Jeff and I have been like, yeah, I was friends with him before ISIS existed, and he used to play in Cable like back in the day. And one of the things that we always bonded over was talking about like movies and horror movies specifically. And so I figured to make it a weekly thing, it would be cool if we had like a rotating, you know, hosts. So I'm on every week, and then it's either me or Mike or me or Jeff. So it's been a lot of fun. That's been like a weekly thing. And then there's like the other half show that I do, like this thing called Everything Went Black, which is like my very first, you know, foray into the podcasting world. And I've been doing that for like 7 or 8 years. And
Really?
yeah, it just nowadays it's just me talking, you know, and about just things. And occasionally I'll have a guest. It started out almost identical to what Metal Matters was. And I think that's what motivated them to bring me on as a podcast host, because they were listening to Everything Went Black. So that's all 3 of those are still are active right now.
That's amazing, dude. 7-8 years ago. That's like you were in the early wave of podcasting. Now it's just insane. So tell me how you even got into podcasting. Why did you even start doing that?
Well, the first podcast I listened to was a horror podcast called the Midnight Podcast, and it was this one guy, and he would just talk by himself. I was blown away by how well this guy spoke, and I was driving out I was living in Brooklyn and working in New Jersey, so I had to drive out there every day, and I had like my iPod at the time, and I just discovered podcasts. I don't even know how I found out about it. Maybe I read about it online. And then I saw on iTunes, there's this thing called podcasts. So I like, that was stuff about horror. Let me check this out. So the very first one was this midnight horror show or midnight podcast. And then, of course, the Joe Rogan Experience was like, I'm a very big fan of, MMA and, just martial arts in general. And I'm not a big comedy fan, ironically, even though I listen to Joe Rogan, who's a comedian.
Yeah.
But I thought that the variety of things that he discussed on his show really inspired me to talk about different things. So I just decided to get into it, just to do it. And, I've been just slowly chipping away at it and being very consistent and developing it as a, just developing it, trying to get better at doing it every year and that sort of thing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it is all about that. It's about being consistent and releasing quality content. And that's what I've been striving to do. And that's an absolutely amazing thing that everyone should keep in their mind if they want to start podcasting. So give me hooked up, hit you up and brought you on to be their host.
Yeah, Gimme did. Yeah. They interviewed me. It's funny. It's, we were playing Ozfest like a few years ago. I think it was like the last Ozfest, and there was like a bunch of press set up, and you get a schedule. They put you on a golf cart and they wheel you out to some tent somewhere, and you start talking to all these different people. And one of the interviews was Gimme Radio, and Tyler. At that time, I did never even heard of them. Like they just started. I think this is like 2 or 3 years ago, and Tyler was like the owner. He's like, when you get back from tour, let's talk, about podcasts and all this other stuff. So I'm like, all right, cool. So from there, we just started the conversation, and he offered me, this gig to host the show and produce it and everything. And that's basically, it was as easy as that, And it's a lot of work, though. It's definitely a lot of work for sure.
You got to be consistent. You got to put the hours in, but it's a passion, just as extreme music is. Yeah, you have to put the work in if you love it. I did want to talk about ISIS because you worked on one of the early records. Am I right?
Oh yeah, it was a demo that they put out as like bonus tracks, I think, on the Red Sea, like a release of that, because it was the Mosquito Control. I think was that it? It was a cassette.
That's what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cassette and it had a mosquito on it.
Yeah.
And then that got re-released a couple of years later as like the B-side of the Red Sea or something like that.
That's awesome. I'm a huge ISIS fan.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And Palms as well, actually. So that's super cool that you're hooked up with them.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I've been friends with those guys since before the band started, and I lived in Boston for a number of years, and that's when Hydrahead was located out there. It's just like, we all, for the most part, we all worked at the Newbury Comics warehouse, and it was except for Turner. Turner he was running at that point. He was running the label full time, pretty much, but. Everyone in that band, even Jeff, for a brief period of time, myself, and a variety of other people in bands like that were kind of up and coming around that time, all worked at the warehouse together.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. We have a mutual friend, the great, the wild, the crazy, Andy Thomas.
Oh yeah, dude. Andy was in Tubes for a brief period. Yeah,
exactly. So I hit him up. He's also a VOX&HOPS alumni. I hit him up and I said, what should I ask Mike that will make him laugh? I didn't ask for any backstory, so all I have is 3 words. Sweet Desert Angel.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's actually a really good one, yeah. That made me laugh.
What's that all about?
Well, Andy was in the band for about a year, just touring with us. Like there was like some problems after we recorded the Grand Annihilation with lineups. So Andy saved my ass and did that whole year of touring with us. And we were in somewhere in the Southwest, and we were staying with some people that were like, I don't know, they were like these wild types of outlaw style people who stayed up all night, didn't seem to have any responsibilities to do the next morning or anything. So we're hanging out in this house, and there's people just raging to all hours. So there's this photograph of this like, it was out of a movie or something. It was almost like this Cormac McCarthy-esque like photograph of like this black and white of this like really sad looking girl, you know what I mean? And I was like, damn, that's like kind of like an off-color photograph to hang. If this is like your girlfriend or like someone who used to be in your life, like this selection of this photo I found to be odd because she looked very somber. So I go to Andy, I'm like, yeah, she's probably buried underneath the pool somewhere, And I was like, my sweet desert angel, man. I was like, this guy probably like writes acoustic guitar songs about his sweet desert angel, So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's the story.
Cheers to Andy, and thank you for sharing, Mike. If you could, let's dance back into craft beer because I love it so much.
Actually, real quick, Andy played a solo on the new record, by the way.
Did he? Awesome. That's good to hear. He's a sick guitarist.
Oh, dude.
Voice of an angel.
Oh, exactly. He's got it all, man. He can play guitar like a madman. He can sing like an angel, for sure.
If you could make a Tombs craft beer, what style of beer would it be, and what would you call it?
That's an excellent question. I think I might go with a sour because I kind of like sours. Let's see. What would I call it? See, the thing is, sours make me think of bright colors. That's the only thing. Because the music that we make is very dark. You know what I mean? So I would call it something like, oh, here we go. I would call it Crimson Glory. Yeah, there you go. It's like,
I want to drink
blood, vampires, like that kind of, Crimson has like a very, even though it's red, it's bright, but it also is reminiscent of like, Mars, the god of war, passion, planets, and blood, vampires, the undead, like that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Let's wrap this up with my classic wrap-up question. It probably never happens to you because you're very in control, and even tonight it's a school night, so you're not drinking. But every once in a while it happens to everyone. What is your hangover cure?
Probably like a pork roll sandwich, which is like a New Jersey delicacy out here. I don't know. You're in Canada, right?
I'm in Canada, Montreal.
You ever make it down to New Jersey?
Not in a long time. Only with the band, actually.
All right. Well, when you come down to Jersey, try to check out a pork roll sandwich. That's like, if you have a hard night of drinking the next day, that'll set you up.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time, having a chat with me, talking about your life, your music, a little bit about craft beer, a lot about podcasting. It was an absolute pleasure. Everybody go check out Tombs' new record coming out November 20th, Under Sullen Skies, via Season of Mist. I know I'm going to, and I'm stoked.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, man.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. It is always so much fun to hook up with a fellow podcaster, to pick their brains, to see how they are coping with our very, very simple world problems that we have when we are a podcaster. It's always a blast. But not only that, I was just super stoked to hang out with Mike and talk about the new Tombs record, which just dropped, called Under Sullen Skies via Season of Mist Records. This record is absolutely fantastic. I've been jamming it a lot since it dropped, and I strongly suggest you check it out if you haven't. If you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should most definitely go and subscribe to it on the podcast platform of your choice. But not only that, it would be great if you could take the time to rate it and write a review, because if you do that, more people just like yourself will be able to discover the Vox and Hops podcast. Vox and Hops is brought to you by Sound Talent Media. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will be back next week with 2 episodes, but until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.